When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel. Looking for good ideas for life? You are far from good hands. If you think the listener is always right, you are far from the right place. Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, a rebel by choice. If you want a host that floats between love and madness, then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
What up? Excuse me while I whip this out.
Oh, gnarly!
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
And good evening, friend.
What's up, Doc?
I'll tell you what's up. Based out of Atlantic City, New Jersey, Geek Time Entertainment runs exclusively along with different events in the area to strategize with their partners who will benefit with increased exposure and patron traffic.
Oh, gnarly!
Geek Time Entertainment will work with your event in increasing the event's traffic via social media, radio, and storefront advertisements.
Holy cow!
Also, they will help increase business for your company and event with different sales incentives.
Duh.
Whether your event will be small or even mid-scale, Geek Time Entertainment is the group to work with.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Contact them today at geektimeentertainment@gmail.com or facebook.com/geektimeentertainment.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
Hi, my name is Meg Foster, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio.
You know, folks, this memoir we got in front of us, and it's almost reminds me of a fiction story, but unfortunately it is not. Kevin Kelly is with us. His book, Both Sides of the Line. This book is actually almost a biography for him, because this new book reveals lessons learned on and off the field for a championship high school football team that was coached by a man that was last seen on TV on John Walsh's show many years ago, America's Most Wanted. Kevin, how are you doing?
Great, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Obviously. Well, you know, it's interesting. I've been flipping through the book and made some notes and whatnot, and I do have to say, you know, some of the notes the publishers actually gave us was interesting, because even going through the book and everything, there was stuff that we didn't even think about asking and whatnot. So, but I'll go with the obvious one here. Why, after 40 years or so from your high school playing days, not that I'm trying to date you, did you decide to get together with some of your teammates who were still alive? And, you know, can you talk about the process of getting to, hey, I'm going to put this book together, to start actually going down that road?
Yeah, it's a great question. In 1998, I would discover that Don Bosco, my high school, closed. Don Bosco was an all-boys Catholic school that was located in downtown Boston. And it was part of the Catholic Conference, which was one of the most competitive and talented conferences in the state of Massachusetts. And what made Don Bosco somewhat stand out in a negative way is that we had football field, we had no practice field, we had no gym, we had no workout equipment. We had to walk 3 miles to go to Science Park, which was on the Charles River, and we practiced on dirt. We were perennial losers in the Catholic Conference. And in 1998, the school closed, and I had an immediate flashback to 1974, and I thought of we were the only team in the school's history ever to win the conference. And then the twist to that story, of course, was having a coach that preached God, family, and country that became a surrogate father for many of us, who took us on a path to adulthood, demanded his kids be drug-free, crime-free, and lead a good life, was in prison for murder. And I started then. I'm not a writer. I worked on it on and off and on and off, and it took me 14 years to find my teammates that were scattered all over the United States, and in 2013 we had a reunion. So it really stemmed from the fact that the school closed, and I was worried about the team and the school and the history of that experience, that it would evaporate into obscurity.
Well, as we were saying, or I was saying during the intro about, this coach who was last seen for America's Most Wanted and whatnot, just so everybody knows, the gentleman we are talking about, well, I'm being respectful, but take it for what it is named Clyde Jack Dempsey. He was an assistant coach at the Don Bosco Tech School. And I find it interesting that he had dual lives, because, like you said, he was all about trying to, as far as his players and such, discipline and trying to lead the right way and everything else. But yet, this whole other side that was associated with the mob, cocaine, as you read into it, then the murder, and obviously you get into the book as far as your perspective that he, or you actually mention here that you, during your last workout session with him, or one of them, that you had a heart-to-heart asking about, is he associated with the mob based on things you hearsay and whatnot. But really, what really sealed it home for you that this man maybe wasn't everything that you thought he was?
Your phone cut out for a second there. Were you asking me what made me know that he was different from what he was as a coach?
Yeah, that you thought of, yes.
Well, Dempsey grew up in Brighton, and that's a section of Boston, and a lot of the kids on my team were from the Brighton area. And so the rumors of Dempsey had weaved its way through the team even before he arrived. My older brother had played at Don Bosco, and I had heard of Dempsey, who was a notorious street fighter. We had heard that that he was working for the mob even before I even met him. So there was a lot of the rumor mill surrounding Dempsey, and then after I think we took that as somewhat of a bravado. I think we took at it as my dad can beat up your dad type of guy. He was type of thing where he was a real tough guy, and I think we really thought that was great. My sitting down with him and confronting him was that as he's preaching to us, how to live a good life. 2 years afterwards, I played a year of college and I played a year of semi-pro, and him and I actually played as teammates, and we won a team championship together. So now we still got a coaches players relationship, but we're both adults now, and I just need to hear it from his point of view. I confront him and I ask him straight out, do you work for the mob? And he explains it to me in a very matter-of-fact, straightforward manner, where he says to me, these people are borrowing money to do things that are illegal. They know what they're getting themselves into. They need to pay that money back, and when they don't, I need to go visit them. And he goes, it's not like in the movies. He goes, the first 2 or 3 times I visit someone, it's really a business relationship. I'm reminding them that they need to make a payment, and that it's serious if they don't. And then if I go to visit somebody 3 or 4 times, it may get a little rough. And he said it with a very non-apologetic notion. And I think in some way for him, he believed that what he was doing was okay.
Well, I found it interesting that, and there's a few other real life, I guess, criminal cases that I can think of, but very few like this. But for you at least, how can you still revere the football side of the man who committed and was found guilty of committing the ultimate crime of murder?
That's a great question. I think, and that's a question I asked my teammates as well. When I discovered that, Dempsey was driving kids to college to make sure that they had the life that he didn't have, and starting to hear story after story after story about what Dempsey did for them personally, that was way, way beyond the call of a coach. I think what I have done in my lifetime and my teammates is that we took the best of Dempsey, meaning that I coach today, and all of the goodness of him is what I took and what I take and what I preach and what I teach. All of that is what I give. I am convinced that if the coach Dempsey could talk to the criminal Dempsey, he would be saying to him, you reap what you sow. You devastated a family, you cut a life short, and you have a price to pay. And that is exactly the way I view it. I look at Dempsey and say, it's a tragedy on many, many, many different levels, and that, you kissed your life away and you devastated a family. So Dempsey put his life into two separate boxes, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because in a way that's exactly what we have done. I take the best of him and what he gave me, and I try to use that, and the piece of him where it is devastating and tragic, I accept that and believe that he had a price to pay.
Well, do you remember when and where you were when you heard at the time of the accusation of him committing the crime?
Well, I had gone off to Hawaii for 3 years, from 1977 to 1980. And then I had heard about the murder. I went back and coached at Don Bosco, and during in 1982, and the murder took place in 1981. So I was really surrounded by a tremendous amount of talk about Dempsey's murder. 9 years later, when he's the featured criminal on America's Most Wanted, I was back up in the University of Maine, and I was coming out of the library when some kid came up to me who was a friend of mine and said, hey, that Dempsey guy you were telling us about, he was on TV tonight. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, he was the featured criminal on America's Most Wanted. So, hearing about Dempsey's murder was back in 1981, 82, but then as my life went on, I had disconnected from that whole thing until he came back up on America's Most Wanted.
Well, how do I put this? Because, when you said you went back to Don Bosco to coach after a couple of years in Hawaii, you ended up coaching with the gentleman, Bob Currier, who was your head coach when you played there, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, did you learn some things from Bob, or Coach Bob there, in the way you handle your coaching nowadays that was similar to what Clyde Dempsey had taught you guys, or was it two different styles there?
It was Bob similar to Dempsey?
Yes.
I think another great question, right? Currier was at Don Bosco for decades, and he was a legendary coach at Don Bosco. He had he was a math teacher. He had a very analytical way of looking at football, and he was demanding. Both of them were very, very demanding and very tough. The difference between the two was that Dempsey, when I talked to players afterwards, and decades later, and I said, what is the one thing that stands out between Dempsey and Currier? And every single player said, I knew Dempsey cared for me. Now, it doesn't mean that Currier didn't care about his kids. He did. He got hundreds and hundreds of kids into Don Bosco for free tuition. He went out and never took any credit for it, never took any public acclaim for it. But Currier was tough, and he was demanding. And I think the difference, I think they both had similar philosophies on what they believed in the game of football and what they wanted to achieve. But Courier had a more business-like. He could be very cutting at times, and where Dempsey was very demanding. And so the difference between the two, I think, was their personalities.
Well, like you mentioned earlier, you spent 14 years doing your homework and talking to folks and just putting this book and story together from pen to paper or keystrokes on a computer. Did you, over that time period when you're putting this book together, did you have any issues come your way in telling the story where there was either concern that you had concern for you or your family's safety or anything like that?
Another great question. I get asked that question more often than I ever thought I would. I was never threatened, putting the story together, but I was spoken to. And what I was reminded of was a few things. One was that there was a lot of people still around that wanted to protect Dempsey. There are people around today that are still connected to mob ties that Dempsey was connected to, and that it would be wise not to be identifying, families that he worked for. And again, I can honestly say that I've never been threatened, but I was. There was some advice that came my way that I should be careful about. Certain things that I reveal in the book. The one thing that's open in the book is the trial. That's a public document, yeah. and it was over 500 pages that were connected to that trial, and his trial that's in the book, that's coming right out of that paperwork. And there was no pressure or discussion about not producing the actual facts of the case.
Yeah, it's not like you were trying to say, oh, what has happened, that happened. You were going off factual information. So you weren't totally speaking out of school. And people can take that for what it is because, when I was doing my homework here, you do work in the education system. So, that can be used a couple different ways.
Right.
So, well, my final question for me would be, actually I have two now that I think of it. First one would be, what has been the response for the book so far been for you?
It's been just a giant surprise. I never thought in a million years that people would be that interested in the book. I've received emails and mail, handwritten letters from people who have read the book and either identify with the football story of the lessons learned on the football field and, staying with it, never to quit, hard work, discipline, all those type of things. And people related to the transitional piece of being an athlete. Most football players, it's a learned behavior. You're freshman and sophomore, you're somewhat of a, walking around in a daze trying to figure out how do I play against kids who are 18 and 19 and big, strong, and all that stuff. And if you stick with it, some good things happen. And then there's so there's a football side, and there's been a very, very strong response by the media, especially the radio media. I've done over 35 interviews, and people are really touching on areas that you touched on, in the sense that the personality of someone like this who lives on both sides or two extremes, the football story and how he changed and he changed our lives. The championship in his, we were all inner city kids. Most of us came from broken and dysfunctional homes. And what the championship gave us and what Dempsey gave us was the opportunity for us to believe in ourselves that we could achieve anything in life. So much so that if you look at the back of the book and you look at that list of what happened to my teammates, one-star general, lawyers, businessmen, international businessmen, policemen, firemen, teachers, coaches. You look at that list, and this is a list of achievement coming from kids where life had kicked a lot of them down, and there wasn't much hope. So, and all of us are on the same page with that this unique gentleman gave us that.
Well, my final question here would be, if Don Bosco Tech didn't close in 1998, and Coach Dempsey didn't pass away in jail, do you think you would have published this story?
The answer, the honest answer to that is no. I think the closing of the school was such a pivotal, gut-wrenching moment for me. And there's a Don Bosco Facebook page, and there's over 800 alumni on that page because we all had the same response. You're dead on. You're absolutely right. If that school was open today, and if Dempsey was still alive in prison, I never would have even thought of writing a book because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a writer. I mean, it wouldn't enter my mind. But I've always been told that I can tell a good story, and the publisher said, you just need to put that story down on paper. And it was a Herculean task. But to answer your question, you're absolutely right. I doubt very much I would have done it.
Both Sides of the Line, author is Kevin Kelly. This book definitely provides a straightforward telling of a fascinating true crime element. And overall, it's a pretty good read. And the fact that it's stranger than fiction brings a story that might be localized at this point to a broader national audience, is ever extending beyond sports fans with a crime element and everything else. Kevin Kelly, thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Freddy Krueger here, a.k.a. Robert England, and you're listening to Crazy Train Radio. Don't take a nap.
With over 30 years of experience and a superb reputation for being a detail-oriented company, Lacey Cleaning has some of the highest work standards in the cleaning business.
That's the fact, Jeff!
Whether it's carpet cleaning, tile, grout cleaning, new construction cleanup, rental turnovers, vent and duct cleaning, odor elimination, office and or business cleaning, power washing, residential cleaning, you name it, they do it. Check them out. To contact them today, laceycleaning@gmail.com or call them at 609-709-8536.
That's what I'm talking about.